Okay folks, this is part 2 of the review of the energy transfers, pyramids of biomass and waste processes assessment for year 10. We're going to carry on from question 4, which is I believe where we got up to in the last part of the video. Okay, so it says gardeners often put waste materials onto compost heaps. The graph shows how the conditions in a compost heap affect how quickly waste materials in the heap decay. I'm just going to scroll down, just have a look at that in a bit more detail. Okay, so the question says for 4A part 1, describe the effect of increasing the temperature from 15 to 25 degrees Celsius on the rate of decay at 20% oxygen concentration. First thing you need to be doing here, folks, picking out from the question which parts it's asking you for. So, increasing the temperature from 15 to 25 degrees, and we want to do that for 20% oxygen concentration. If it's in an exam format, just make sure you're underlining the key bits on there, okay? So we are doing it for 20% oxygen concentration, which is shown on our x-axis. So x-axis is showing a concentration of oxygen. We go to 20 and we go up there. So you would do this using a ruler. I'm just doing it using my finger on the iPad. Okay, and what you do for each one, where it hits your line for each temperature, so at 15 degrees, which is about here, go across on your x-axis, and that will give you a value for your rate of decay on your y-axis. So this is your y-axis here. So we can do that for at 15 degrees and at 60 degrees. Okay, just scroll down a second. Okay, so most people on this question managed to get 1 mark, and they got that by saying that decay is faster. So decay is faster at 25 degrees Celsius. So that was for 1 mark. For the second one, you had to use the data that it was showing you in the graph. So if we look back up here, and we'll just analyse the graph. So at 15 degrees, which is this line here, at 20%, it has a rate of decay which is around about 30. So it's halfway between the 20 and the 40 there. So that's 30 arbitrary units. If we go up to 25 degrees, we can see that the rate of decay is doubled to around about 60. Okay, and to get the mark, you literally just need to state that in your answer. So at 15 degrees Celsius, rate of decay equals 30. At 25, it equaled 60. So that second part was to get your second mark there. So you get 1 mark for the decay bit, and then 1 mark for actually using that data in your answer. Okay, we'll go over to our next page then. Okay, so this question here says gardeners are advised to put waste materials into special compost bins. These bins have holes in the sides. Holes in the sides of the compost bin help the waste materials to decay faster. This was a generally well answered question. Most of you managed to make the link that if there's holes in the side, it allows oxygen in, so it allows O2 in, and that speeds up the rate of decay. Okay, speeding up decay, because if more oxygen's getting in, it will allow an increased rate of respiration for the decomposers. So those are the things like your bacteria and your fungi. If they're respiring a lot faster, then they can decay a lot faster. Okay, so that was it for part 2. 4B, a gardener noticed that some of his plants were growing poorly. He put some decayed compost onto the soil around the plants. 6 months later, the plants were growing well. Explain why. Just quite another well answered question. You just need to say that the compost contains nutrients that the plants need. Okay, so those nutrients are what the plant needs to grow. Okay, question 5 here. What I'm going to do, I'll turn over to the next slide in a second, and I'll get a copy of the diagram there so that we can look at it at the same time. Okay, so you should now be able to see the diagram of the food web up on the left around here, and we've got our questions on the next page to the right. So we'll just have a quick read of those. So it says the diagrams below show a pyramid of the numbers and a pyramid of the biomass for 0.1 hectare of this wood. So we've got our pyramid of numbers here on the left and pyramid of biomass on the right. It says for part 1, name one organism from the level labelled X. Okay, so you need to look at your pyramids. We know that the bottom part is producers, so I'll just put prod there for producers. The second part are primary consumers. Let's put primary C for primary consumers, and the second part is going to be secondary consumers. Secondary consumers there. So what you need to do is try and identify one of those organisms on your food chain. I'll make that a little bit bigger and bring it over. I'll move that out of the way for now. We can see that we have got at the bottom of our food web all the different producers. And remember, your producers are your plants. Okay? Primary consumers, the insects, moths, other leaf eaters and earthworms. Which means that our secondary consumers, which are what we're looking for, you could have said voles, small birds or beetles for the mark there. Okay? So any of those points, voles, small birds or beetles for part 1. Okay, so we'll move that out of the way, make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so birds, voles or beetles. Quite straightforward, that one, and most people got that right. Part 2, explain as fully as you can why the level labelled Y is such a different width in the two pyramids. Okay, so for this you need to analyse the different pyramids and find out what they were showing. So your pyramid of numbers is showing the number of organisms that there are within that ecosystem. The pyramid of biomass is showing the overall dry mass of that organism. So what they were trying to get you to make the link for here was that Y is a tree. So there's not going to be very many trees. So there's not many trees, which is shown on the pyramid of biomass, which is this one here. So it's showing there's about 200 trees. However, you can see on the right diagram at the top, which is your pyramid of biomass and not your pyramid of numbers, that they've got an overall dry mass or biomass of 5,139 grams per square metre. So there's not many trees, however, trees have lots of biomass. Okay, so that was out of 3 marks. You get 1 mark for mentioning that it's a tree, second mark for saying there's not many trees, and your third for saying that there's lots of biomass in the trees. Okay, move on to our last question, which is 5b. Explain as fully as you can what eventually happens to energy from the sun, which is captured by the plants in the wood. Now, there were a total of 8 marks that you could get here for mentioning the points, and there were 2 other marks that you could get for mentioning the sequence in which energy flows. Okay, so the first thing you could mention here is asking us, explain as fully as you can what eventually happens to the energy from the sun. So we know we've got to say, for a start, what's happening to that energy from the sun when it's captured by plants. Okay, so the light energy is converted to chemical energy, and that is by photosynthesis. Okay, so 1 mark for photosynthesis. We then needed to think of the different ways in which the plants can use energy. So one thing that plants use energy for all the time, all living creatures respire. So respiration was one thing. Another thing that you could have mentioned was growing. So plants definitely grow. Okay, so they use some of that energy and the nutrients from the ground to grow. So at the minute we've got 3 marks. So 1 for saying photosynthesis, 1 for respiration, 1 for growing. You could also then go on to talk about what else might happen to the plant. So it could be consumed by primary consumers. I'll just put PC for primary consumers. So it's consumed by primary consumers, and some of that energy gets passed on. However, you had to pick out the fact that not all energy is passed on. So some energy, is actually around about 90%, is wasted. Okay, and those are through all of your normal body functions. So once again, you could talk about respiration in your animals, growth, movement, anything that requires energy. Okay, so finally, that energy gets passed on from one animal to another through food chains. It goes from your primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, until eventually those organisms die. So death occurs. And that means that a lot of the energy that was in them is now trapped. But you need to mention that decomposers and detritivores can get that energy. Through decay. So that's the decay process there, folks. Okay, so we've got there so far. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points there you could have mentioned. 10 points that you could have mentioned. It's important though to get the extra 2 marks to make it up to 10. You had to say that energy gets passed on from plants to animals when they're eaten, and that eventually animals will die and the decomposers will start to break them down. Okay, that is the end of the assessment review. If you've got any questions, then just come and see me in my class at any time. Thank you.